is E&P Reports, a vodcast from editor and publisher. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. And this episode sponsored by IQ Audience Plus by Town News. Consumer revenue has never been more important. Digital leaders at media organizations worldwide understand the need to accelerate its growth now. Plus, traditional one-size-fits-all paywalls aren't the answer. They're blunt instruments that treat all visitors the same way. IQ Audience Plus is a smart, dynamic metering solution that empowers media companies to maximize revenue by identifying key audiences, seeding engagement, and growing membership and subscriptions. Supercharge your consumer revenue, grow engagement, and bolster your advertising income now with IQ Audience Plus. Visit townnews.com EP today to learn more. And hi, greetings. I'm Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P, editor and publisher magazine. For those of you who don't know who we are, look us up on Google. Wikipedia will show you that we are considered the Bible of the North American newspaper industry. Been around since 1884. I've only managed this puppy for a couple of years, but I'd like to say that we really do target now news publishers, mostly executives, who, well, news publishing has three legs to the stool. In our opinion, it's a human being, company, or entity that has to craft journalistic content. There's your first leg. Find an audience for it. There's your second leg. And then here's how we get in today's topic, and monetize it. There's the third leg. Journalistic content with an audience, monetize it. E&P Reports is dedicated each and every week to give you timely industry information for the news publishing executive. By the way, you can find us at editorandpublisher.com/vodcasts. By all means, explore us on any podcast channel and follow us. Or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, where we have the video version of E&P Reports, smash the subscribe button below, hit the bell to the right, and you'll get an update each and every time we upload a new episode of E&P Reports. Now, that third leg is about revenue. There are many different ways to gain revenue in today's world, one of which is reader revenue, audience revenue, having subscribers. There's a lot of crowdsourcing going on now, or even nonprofit donations, but advertising is still a very important pillar to the revenue we need to support newsrooms. And one of the kings of advertising sales in the broadcast industry, especially on the television side, is a very, very good friend of mine. His name is Jim Doyle. Odds are you've heard of him if you've been through that portion of the media industry. Jim and I go way back. I mean, way back to the point where when I started as a morning man and operations manager at a small radio group in Maine in 1984, he was in the same market, had come through that same radio station, and he was managing sales for the big television broadcast group. And we've maintained a friendship ever since. Jim's published a new book, Selling with a Servant Heart. I started reading it just a few days ago because I got an advance copy. It comes out December 7th, 2021, but pre-sales are going on right now on every single place you can find a book, and it means a lot to me. It circles back to some of the basic tenets that can make sales not only profitable for you, but enjoyable. Enough talk. Let's have some fun as we go one-on-one here at E&P Reports with Jim Doyle. Jim, you and I go way back. I mean, way back. I remember the day I met you, sir. It was in the winter of 1984. Believe it or not, I was a morning man and operations manager for Don Ray Media, working out of Grand Junction, Colorado, reporting into Denver, because this was to their TV station. And you were in Portland, Maine, but I was auditioning to a man named Ron Frizzell to come in as his ops manager, and you had to vet me. He made me go to your house over the weekend. Remember, he flew me in. I doubt if you remember this. Yeah. And you had to vet me. And that's when I first met you, 27 years ago.
No. I think it's like 37 years ago.
Is it? Oh my God, I think you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously I must have vetted you because you're still speaking to me.
Well, I got the gig, and it was the best.
For that. Yeah, good. Yeah.
I got a gig working in Maine to be the ops manager for an AM/FM combo in Portland, Lewis, and Auburn. You at the time were vice president of sales at the biggest broadcast operation, the TV giant there, a big one. And we got to know each other through the advertising community and the media community in Maine. But I'm now going to blow you some smoke. You were a mentor to me through all those years. I mean,
Right.
when I found trouble, I would call you. When I moved to TV and I was scared, and you kept saying to me, Mike, relax, take a breath. And I remember I had to actually take over that number 3 rated TV station in Bangor for a while. But you were always there for me, sir. And I really, I'd be flipping hamburgers if it wasn't for you. So
no, that's not true. And both of us owe a lot to our mutual mentor.
Ron Frizzell.
Yeah. Don't you think in your career, I believe so much in the power of the teachers I had.
Oh, yes.
People who just influenced my life so much. And one of the fears I have is that we're so crazy busy today as leaders that sometimes the opportunity to mentor becomes harder when I've got 30 emails I haven't returned. And what a gift that I was given by Ron and 2 other men that were so important to me that I still today talk about the lessons I learned from those guys.
I went back for a reunion a few years ago, just before COVID. And I don't know if you know the building, the WLAM. Right. I hope we're not boring our audience. We're just chatting here, but this is my show. I can do whatever the heck I want. But I went to that building. It was torn down, but the brick where the transmitters is still there. And I met Ron and some of the old team there, and then we had a party. Right. And it was the most fun I ever had in my life, working in Maine and learning from a master. And Ron, I hope you're watching this. We love you dearly. We know you're thriving, but and he's just a great guy, and he taught both of us.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting because I, done this new book that's coming out quickly, and I quoted him in one section for leaders.
Which was the quote? What was the quote?
Well, it was, if you want people to show up at 8 o'clock, you need to show up at 7:30 if you're the leader.
I remember. Yeah.
And it really is that, people don't study what we say; they pay attention to what we do. And for leaders, it's so unbelievably important that we set an example of the culture we want to create. So, and I really always remembered that, because I was the guy who wanted everybody to come at 8, but I showed up at 8:15. It's like, all right, sorry, I'm late.
This is the book. I started it, and I'm going to be honest with you, I cried a little, because there is stuff in here. This is Selling with a Servant Heart. And if I got an advanced copy, I feel like I'm one of those cable shows now. I got an advanced copy, but Jim, and you autographed it. Thank you. It's a brilliant book. A lot of cool stuff in here, but Selling with a Servant Heart, 10 lessons on the path to joy and increased income. And what I love about this is sales has always had a bad stigma. We'll get into media in a second. I just want to talk about sales in general. I always think about Pee Wee Herman, that show that was on years ago, the knock on the door, salesman, or the idea of a salesperson. But you and I both spent decades training, analyzing, writing, speaking on a topic that was near and dear to us, which is sales. And I always resented the idea that sales was a dirty word. And some people still call it a necessary evil. I'm not to, Gordon Burrell, right? And so do I. I went to the last conference before COVID. I'm there in the audience in Miami at this big conference down there. And this guy from Haibu, the Yellow Page guy, stands up and says, it's all do it yourself now. We don't believe in salespeople. And he's screaming this at an audience. And I know deep in my heart that that's never going away. Don't you agree? There needs to be a human interaction in the process. Yes, no?
Well, I think we're going to find some ways to automate certain parts of our process. Already have.
Yes.
But I think ultimately, look, I think for most of us in media, the lifeblood of our future is in the ability to develop new business and new sources. I don't see that being done by artificial intelligence. I think at some point, someone has to sit across the desk from a decision maker and say, this is how we can serve you. This is how we can help you accomplish your goals. And so I would overwhelmingly agree with that. But I think there will be processes that get automated. We'll be able to make selling maybe more efficient than it's been. But no, we're going to be in front of people.
Okay, so what you did in this book was you spoke to, I guess, the people you sought out were, you introduced them at the beginning, which was great. Right. I love the way you set this up. And you came up with 10 lessons that ultimately lead to joy in sales. And this I like, because I've never hated this profession. Because I had a mentor named Ron who, he had to beat me up a little to get out there and do it. I mean,
Sure.
my background was I resented it. I didn't want to sell, and he made me do it to better. And today I owe him everything, because if I didn't get into the business side,
Right.
I remember him saying, if you're going to manage a radio station someday and you don't know the street, you will fail.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think you have to know the sales process, but there's joy in it if you approach it from a different level than I've got to be this aggressive, good for nothing guy that goes in and. Is this the purpose behind the book? Is this what you were trying to do?
I think it's one of the purposes for sure, because I see too many people, young people, who either because of the stereotype or because sometimes of leadership in their early sales career, think that this is all about close early and close often, and how am I going to get my money, and don't understand that the most extraordinary salespeople that I've met. And my experience was largely in media. So I interviewed, close to 35 people for this book in different fields and different industries.
Right, of course.
And to learn successful people, those people have a commitment to serving. They have almost an obsession with customer outcomes. How do we make this so right for our customer? This is way beyond win-win. Win-win says I win and you win. Servant sellers say, I want you to win. And I know that if you win, ultimately it will be good for me.
Well, in the description, you use the term customer obsessed. I love that. Right. Because that's why I started getting really, because I said, but we sold that way. I was taught that way. It's
Sure.
not about, it's not the product, right? It's the customer. It's serving another human being's needs and goals. And you talk about that's where the joy comes from, right? I mean, that's where it all.
Exactly. But I don't want people listening to this, especially, the bosses who listen to this, think that the first word of this book is selling, the title. This is a book about increasing sales impact. It's not just about relationship. But it turns out that if I become obsessed with customers and I demonstrate that to a customer over a longer period of time, that creates huge wins for me. So these people who I interviewed, they have success. I'll give you one quick example.
Sure.
One guy that I interviewed is in the RV business, Dave Wong. He probably sells more of dollar volume of REs than 90% of the dealerships in America. He sells these $2 million coaches. $2 million, these big coaches that you buy, and they're bought by very wealthy people, retired entrepreneurs, business leaders, and 60% of his business is repeat, and 30% is referral. When your business is that strong because of customer loyalty, and you're getting referrals from your customers, it really makes being successful and having a good year pretty easy. How obsessed he is. A friend of mine introduced me to Dave and told me about him. He's a customer of Dave's. And he said, I'm got a question about my coach. And I dial his cell phone and he picks it up. I ask him the question. And in the course of it, I say, well, where are you today, Dave? He said, I'm in Argentina. He forwards his cell phone to his satellite phone so he can answer questions. And I said to Dave, why would you do that? He said, because that 5 minutes says to this guy, I am here for you. And talk about somebody who builds loyalty. That's obsession to customer outcome.
When I first went off and left that operation in Maine, I stayed there for 16 years. And you saw my growth there. I went from morning man operations manager on the programming side, and then Ron threw me on the street selling AM radio. By the way, when I left that morning show, I had a 55 share. Yeah. More than half the market was listening to that morning show, but everybody's telling me AM is dead. Those days, right? I mean, and I'd hit the street, and he said, you get no list. You're going to go out because you wanted me to prospect for a year. He said, I'm going to teach you how to do this and get out there. But when I finally left that operation after being his general manager and growing and going into TV, I asked him if I could take his sales training notes. Remember, he used to do that sales training up in that conference room, right? And people would attend from all over. And the thing I remember a section I still train on today that I've modified over the years: empathy versus ego drive. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, the qualities of the best salespeople. But when I analyze a potential seller, I'd rather have more empathy I think you can't fake empathy, can you? If help me
Well,
with this.
I love that. It actually comes from a testing company that still exists called Caliper,
Of course,
which
caliper. Yes.
which measures sales attribute. And so what happens is, look, if all I have is ego drive, I come across as hard sell.
Exactly.
If all I have is empathy can become sympathy.
And you
So
believe every objection, and you don't help the customer
exactly.
get to the next level.
Well, yeah, that's a great example, because I'll give you an example specifically. A client says to our newspaper rep, I know, business is terrible. The high empathy person says, oh, I know, I've heard a lot of that after the pandemic. The person who combines empathy with drive says, I know, I've heard that. What do you think we could do about it?
Let's change. Let's move forward.
What can we do about that? So I think that empathy is unbelievably important, but the greatest sellers have that ability to balance, and the ability to really say, how can we help to solve this problem? And I'd be inclined to not say that one is more important than the other.
Well, but when I say you can't fake empathy, if you're a Willy Loman, I don't know if anyone understands what doing Death of a Salesman, it means you can fake it. You can sell a product you don't believe in. You can do something. I don't want to know that kind of seller, that all ego. I don't want them in my family. I don't want them in my circle of friends. I don't want that person around me.
No, in fact, I think most customers find that disgusting.
Right.
And really, and don't connect with that at all. But I think effective sellers, once they have, so one of the things that I think is one of the most critical attributes is the whole power of active, acute listening. Rory Vaden, who I introduced for this book, I just love, he said, it's not just about listening, it's about acute listening. A friend of mine produced a 60 Minutes kind of show, or did stories for a 60 Minutes kind of show. And he said they got the best sound bites when they had interviewed, they asked the question got answered, and then they didn't respond.
Leaving that gap.
Yeah, leaves silence, right? Nature abhors a vacuum, and so do people. So at the next point they would get the more honest sound. That to me is acute listening. And acute listening becomes the foundation to really identifying customer needs. If you look at, I come from the advertising business, so the people who are listening to this, I feel simpatico to, because, we've all made thousands and thousands of calls. The difference between average salespeople and great salespeople, average salespeople spend just a very brief amount of time asking questions, and a lot more time, here's my plan, here's my package, here's the special insert we're doing. Whereas the people who are truly obsessed with customer outcomes are spending a lot of time learning about the business and its needs. This is not just how's business, it's a business conversation. And when they learn about the business and its needs, all of a sudden they can say, this is why this insert might make sense for you. This is why this program is on our digital assets makes the most sense for what you're trying to accomplish. You only get that by asking questions, and you only get that with really acute listening.
See, that's why I think I excelled at it. Not if I can I don't want to insert myself into this dialogue, but correct me if I'm wrong. Have you ever had your wife yell at you because you're at a restaurant or a business and you get into a dialogue with the business owner and you just start going nuts because you want to learn more? Like my kid had a birthday party here when, I have a little girl, she's now in her first year of college. But when she was 13, this big truck shows up at our house, takes out laser tag inside the truck. It's a huge semi, all the games, every kid in the world came, even boys came to her party. My wife couldn't find me for an hour and a half because I'm chatting with the driver going, what are your margins? Do you make money during the week? How does this thing work? Are you ever accused of that, Jim?
I have a mentor and teacher in my life right now, and he has a way of asking me questions that I have to think about the answer for a long time. And but he asked me a question one day. He said, "What do you think has made you successful?" And I had the instant answer to that. I said, "I've asked a million questions." And actually, I think I did the math that if you had a 50-year career, it's actually possible to, I mean, it's like, I don't forget how many questions a week it is, but I think I may have actually literally asked a million questions. And when my kids are with them, they think I've asked them a million that week. But it's asking questions is probably, I think in many ways, that's the way we learn. And by the way, I think for leaders, it's also asking questions of our team, and and especially asking questions of our high performers.
I agree. I think I always say sales is mostly listening, not talking. And you got to care while you're listening. That's why I love this book. The other thing I loved about this is you do not, thwart or put down the idea of closing, but you try to imply, which is I always scream, that how many times have you been asked to do training on closing? And you, I need you to talk to my team about closing. And you're trying to say, if I don't take them back to the basics, how can I train on closing? I mean, you're just wanting me to teach them how to isolate it and rephrase it. And, I always joke, or I just did a training on objections. I still consult, and I had to do a webinar, and I did it on objections. And then I said at the end, now, by the way, this is how you diffuse an objection. And I looked at, and I said, but I've never heard one in my entire life. I don't, because I'm so empathetic during the sales process. Does that make sense? And I'm listening. The objections just don't happen. Everything flows through. And I think that, am I wrong? This is what you try to say in here, that all that stuff is important. But if you're selling from the proper place in your heart, you're not going to experience all those things.
Yeah, but I tell you what's interesting. So 35 interviews, and man, at the end of them, I was just overwhelmed with some of the successful people I've met. But every single one of them, I wondered if, because of this orientation to serve, they would have a less focus on closing. No, they're all very aware of the moment at which they ask for commitment. And they're all very conscious of that. And I think that's true of most of the great salespeople. But to your point, I think that effective closing is a function of what I've done before I get to that point.
Exactly.
I go into this car dealership a few years ago. We just had a great experience with a car dealership recently. But I went on a car dealer lot, fairly upscale. And I get one of these close early and close often salespeople.
Oh.
And he says to me, I want to be your car salesman. What would it take to be your car salesman today? And notice he didn't particularly care what car I bought or if I even liked it, but he wanted to be my car. At one point in this conversation, he did like 4 mini closes in the first 5 minutes we're together.
Did you explain to him you were a sales trainer? And
he asked me at one point what I did for work, and I said I'm a sales trainer. And you thought that might make him go,
trigger him to watch out.
No, he was like, "Oh, a sales trainer. What would you do to sell a sales trainer?" I'm like, and so now that's the far opposite. That's the that's the high ego drive, no empathy guy, and that's not where most people are.
Mistrained.
But at the end of that experience, and most of us have had that experience, don't you want to take a shower?
Yeah, it's like I always tell any potential salesperson, avoid the movie Glengarry Glen Ross. You do not want to see that famous scene with Alec Baldwin. Coffee is for closers. ABC, always be closing.
But you sit in front of an audience of sellers and you say ABC, you're still going to have 40% of the room go always be closing.
Yeah,
close early and close often, and that's one of my missions. Is to say to those people and that there's a better way. There's a way to make a lot more money. There's a way to have a lot more customer loyalty. There's a way for companies to really grow their business as they
have joy through the process because you're helping someone.
Exactly. I mean, look, I'm sitting in you and I have had the experience in both of our careers, and probably most of the executives who are watching this have had the experience of you're in a car dealer's office.
Yes.
So I'm in this car dealer's office. We've all been in the car dealer's office. This sales rep comes in and he says, he just had this huge gross profit, which is how they get paid in those dealerships. And the sales manager of this dealership says, "Yeah, you put that guy to sleep." And they're high-fiving. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, I let's go home tonight and celebrate that with my wife. Oh, honey, let's go to dinner. Get dressed up. I put somebody to sleep today. Where's the joy in that?
It's
I love to go into somebody's office who's had a problem in their business after they've run a campaign and done some advertising and have them say, boy, that was cool.
Well, how many times have you said this in training? Because I've done it, and I once got yelled at afterwards. I said, if you don't believe in this product, don't take it to market. They'll see right through you. Let's sit down and talk about it. If you don't have faith, then you have to. We all have audience. I mean, I don't care if you're number 3, number 2, number 1. You've got audience. You're just. But if you don't believe that you can help the advertiser, you need to sit down now and figure that out in your brain. Because if you go out on the street, I call that the sell before the sell. And you know what I mean? If you ain't sold, it goes.
But not only is that right, but the definition of the word enthusiasm, which is such a powerful word of enthusiasm, but the last 4 letters stand for I am sold myself. I am sold myself.
There's the pull quote, everyone. There's the pull quote right there. Yes.
But let me go even deeper with that. One of the number 1 responsibilities of leaders is to sell the team.
How many times have you gone into a sales organization and it's the coach? That's the problem. It's every time you lose a seller, you should be feeling like you just lost an appendage. What did you do wrong with this human being in a way?
I'm going to argue that. First of all, I think if you lose one seller, look, people are mobile, spouses get opportunities, but I think if you're losing a number of them, it's never the passengers who crash the plane.
Right.
You're never going to see a sign that says plane crash in Tampa, passenger error. Yeah. So it's leaders who crash planes. And so we have a responsibility of leaders to create a culture. And to go back to what we talked about before, part of that is I've got to model the behavior I want. I've got to applaud the behavior that I'm trying to see be replicated. And I've got to practice the behavior myself. So I said model the behavior.
All right. So selling with a servant heart, there are 10 takeaways in here that are amazing. And because I had started the book only like 4 days ago, so I was skipping around and reading them. I don't want to release all 10 because I want people to get the book. Can you give us one example of the 10? Just right now. So
sure.
As if go ahead.
We've already talked about a couple of them because one of them is ask a million questions.
Right.
Another is called teach, not sell.
Right.
And which I really love. The one that surprised me the most, the one that, you sort of do outlines of books before you sit down to write. As I did the interviews, the thing that probably surprised me the most was, I called it in the book, the responsibility of trust. So a servant heart seller builds these incredibly strong relationships. But as one of them said to me, if somebody's giving you money, you can't try. You've got to perform. In other words, he said, there's no try with a customer's $100,000. You've got to perform. And I think what that really drove home to me is that as a leader, I've really got to make sure that the people that I have interacting with customers really not just know the product, but know how the product works. Know why one digital product is right for this marketing situation, but it's not right for that. So that we're not just selling the new shiny object, the thing that we want to promote. We're really looking at what can do the best job for that customer. That's a pretty awesome responsibility. There's a second part to that too, which is can I trust the person that is working with me, my rep? Can I trust that person so that they hold on to my secrets? Because if I'm going to disclose to you in a sales call something that's going on in my business, I don't want that walk down the street to my competitor.
That's so critical. You have to look at yeah,
exactly. So there are behaviors to demonstrate to a customer that I write about that demonstrate to a customer that you trust them. But there's also this whole idea of, do I have So a lot of people want to be a partner with their clients. It's, do I have the capability to do that? Can I bring them something that I know confidently is going to make a difference?
Well, you do believe in I believe that sales is also a transference of energy between two human beings. I mean, I've read books on body language and all that kind of stuff, but there's this flow that happens between two human beings. You agree?
Oh, one of my favorite lines, the late Keith Harold, greatest motivational speaker of all time, says, "You can't jump a dead battery with a dead battery." So if you are going to go out to interact with a customer, I got to bring energy. My belief is that energy comes from my own conviction that what I have is going to be good for the customer.
You can't fake it.
But that's
you can fake it. Go on Broadway. Get on a stage.
But that's a leadership issue, Mike. That's a leadership issue because the challenge is, and I'll be direct about your industry, which I know and love, which I believe is so critical to the future of democracy. I talk about too many leaders. I'll talk about it in the broadcasting space who are just saying to themselves, "Oh, thank God I can retire in another year." So they don't believe themselves in what you said earlier, which is, if I've got an audience, I can make a difference for a customer.
In survival selling, when I put together my outline, I collected my favorite quotes, and I have like 500 in there in the back, and I reference which page they're on. So I saw Zig Ziglar once, the great late, and he said, "They don't care what you know till they know that you care." Remember that one? So I quoted to Zig, and I found out later it was Teddy Roosevelt who said it in 1902. But
more people think Zig said it than Teddy.
Right.
Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
And the reason that I referenced my book is when I was writing it, and I can tell you did the same thing. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, was trying to write for both the manager and the salesperson. And you've done the same here. I can read this as a manager, but even if I'm a newbie, just trying to figure out if I want to get into the B2B sales environment of any kind, not just media, that was hard, wasn't it? I mean,
well, at the end, I added a couple of chapters at the end of the book, specifically for leaders, because I really believe that that's the critical element. And some of the stuff was just so very thought-provoking that people were doing. When you say, "Okay, I really want to serve my customers," sometimes that changes process. I interviewed Brian Richmond, and Brian is part of a family-owned insurance agency in mid-sized market in Michigan. So, most of us on this podcast have bought insurance, and you buy a new car, you got to call the person at the agency to give them the new serial number and get it added.
Right. Yeah.
So most of the interaction. So Brian looks at his process, and he breaks up his teams. He has an inbound team, I think he calls them the red team, and then he has an outbound team he calls the yellow team. So think about this. You're a customer of his agency, the Richmond agency, and your insurance is about to come due for your home. You may get a call from somebody on the yellow team that says, "We looked at other options with other carriers, and we found we could get you the same amount of coverage, but it's 10% less." Now, I don't know about you. My insurance agency, I've had the same insurance agency for 20 years. I've never gotten a call like that.
Wow. Goes back.
So it's saying, if I really am committed to customers, what does that say about my process?
Well, and it's funny that I'm sure you're like me when you're just interacting with any business, flying on an airplane, going to a hospital. Remember when you and I we're old enough to remember when Paul McCartney was in a band before Wings, right? I mean, we're little. But remember the days when customer service didn't exist. I mean, the airlines treated you like garbage, the airports. I mean, now people realize every time I interact now with someone, especially when with software companies and stuff, there's a survey. Are we pleasing? I mean, I think the whole universe is starting to move in that direction. Thank God. Because if we're in a free market society, right? If you're not pleasing your customer, someone will take that customer away from you. And that's just key in life. Do you agree?
I couldn't agree with that more. But I don't know about the newspaper space, but I would say in the television space, we don't have enough leaders who are deeply engaged with their largest customers.
Oh,
you can fill out all the
black.
you can fill out all the surveys you want.
Right.
But if I am a leader and I am not interacting with my best customers, and because I'm bogged down by emails and spreadsheets and budget meetings and challenges on the journalism side, I think that I'm going to miss that opportunity to really demonstrate to a customer we do care, and that's going to start. That's going to start at the top.
That's a good place to leave it. I always get yelled at by snarky podcast reviewers that I go too long. But I've enjoyed this tremendously. Jim, the book, where do I find? I mean, it's already out there. If you type in "Selling with a Servant Heart" on Google, you've already got it up on everywhere. It's on Amazon, it's on Books A Million, all those other places and more. Is there a website people can go to?
ServantSellingBook.com. ServantSellingBook.com is my website for this project. The book comes out on Amazon on December 7th. So if you listen to this, it's coming quickly or has just come out if you weren't right there when Mike posted this. But so December 7th is the launch date. By the way, reach out to me if you do buy this for your teams. We have a study guide that can turn this into a 12-week training experience.
That was the next thing I wanted to ask. Are you going to build a training program?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a 12-week study guide, which I would send to anybody who's just if they bought a book for members of their team. So it'd be my privilege.
And of course, you're available if there's any conferences. Are you still doing that? Do you still get in an airplane? You're the one that taught me the lesson when I started hitting the road. God, 20 some odd years ago, you said to me, I could do what I do for free. They pay me to sit in the airplane.
Maybe to travel.
Yeah.
So the specific answer is I am on a limited basis doing some stuff to support the message of this book because I love it. But I don't want to build another business. I've done that a few times. And so 100% of my speaking proceeds is going to go to charity.
You're very involved with the homeless, I know.
Homeless community in Sarasota is a passion of mine.
And you're hitting the ball very frequently at golf. Is that correct, sir? You hit them.
I suck at golf.
But you still play it every day. Right?
I'm way better at sales and speaking than I am at golf.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, but I like golf also because if you change your head and just say the next hole's a new hole, you can just enjoy it as you go through the journey.
Well, I'm going to work on that later on today.
Jim, close friend, mentor, if I may say so. It's honored to have you on this program. Thank you for your time investment. And if someone wants to email you, it's simply Jim at Servant Selling Book. Is it
Jim Doyle at ServantSellingBook.com or Jim at JimDoyle.com.
Jim at JimDoyle.com. Thanks, Jim. Stay healthy.
Oh, thank you.